Welcome to Machine Minds, where technology and humanity meet. I'm your host, Greg Terrusian, founder of Samson Rose, a recruiting and search business focused on the robotics and AI industries. The Machine Minds show is where we dive deep into the intricate world of robotics and artificial intelligence. As a staffing industry leader with a passion for the frontiers of technology, I'm pleased to be bringing you intimate conversations with the founders, investors, and trailblazers who are at the heart of the AI and robotics revolution. In each episode, we dig into their journeys, the applications of the products they're working on, and the breakthroughs that are shaping our future. Join us as we explore how these machine minds are transforming the way we live, work, and understand our world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about this amazing field, you'll learn something new with each episode. Let's delve into the extraordinary. Let's delve into machine minds. Hello and welcome to Machine Minds. I'm your host, Greg Terrusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Jeff Burnstein, president of the Association for Advancing Automation, otherwise known as A3. Thanks for being on the show today, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, Greg. Looking forward to the talk.
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, let's jump into it. So, as I always do when I start the show, I like to set the stage and have our guests talk a bit about their background and career journey. So if you could share with the audience your career journey and what led you into the world of automation and robotics, that would be awesome.
Okay. It's a little unusual for people in the robotics industry, but I started as an English major in college at the University of Michigan and wasn't sure what I wanted to do. It was maybe be a sports writer. I love sports, or go into public relations. And it was getting near the end of my senior year of college, and I didn't really have a plan for after graduation. And a friend of mine was dating someone, and they had an opening at an association. I'd never heard of an association before. I didn't know what that was. And this association was promoting the Central Business District in downtown Detroit. Okay. I grew up in Detroit. So this sounded interesting to me. I'd spent a lot of time in downtown Detroit when I was young. A little bit later, there were major difficulties in Detroit. There was a major riot. And so Detroit, at this point, in the late 70s, was on the way back from some of those difficulties, or at least was attempting to be on the way back, billing itself as a Renaissance city. And so working at this association, I got to do so many things. I got to do public relations, which I liked. I got to do a lot of writing, which I liked. And I got to organize events like ethnic festivals and work with the musicians and hire people to come and, be vendors at these events and meet
Very
industry people, but, local business people who ran stores and, businesses, and then politicians like the mayor. Coleman Young was the mayor at that time.
Wow.
So, and then I was giving talks to the taxi cab drivers, telling them that they're the first front line of ambassadors to the city. So when I look back on that, everything I've done in my career, I did there first. And it was a great training ground. Shortly after that, I made the mistake that a lot of people make early in their careers. Somebody offered me more money, so I left. So after about a year and a half, I thought, I'll make a little bit more money and I'll work for this ad agency. I hated it. I hated the job. I don't think they liked me very much. It didn't last very long. And so I was out looking for a job again within, a short period of time after leaving the job I liked. And just going to reading the paper. And that time you would go in the newspaper and look at, for help wanted ads, and went to like a headhunter firm. And ultimately there was this job at the Society of Manufacturing Engineers. Now, it was in public relations, which I knew something about. I knew nothing about manufacturing or engineering. But somehow I got that job. And the most interesting part of that job, it was a large organization and it was holding events. I knew something about promoting events. and again, writing press releases and talking to the press. But the most interesting thing is that they had a robotics group.
Mm.
And at this time, we're in 1981, and robotics was going to be the next industrial revolution. Everybody believed that. Every projection was robotics heading straight up. And so I really liked working on those projects. And shortly after that, in 1982 or 83, the robotics group broke away from the Society of Manufacturing Engineers. They wanted to be a trade association and not a technical society like SME is. SME
Okay.
had individual members. This was going to be a trade association for company members. So they asked me if I would join the trade association, and I jumped at the opportunity. So I became employee number 5, I believe it was, leaving an organization of 300 people. But I was in charge of marketing and public relations, which is what I wanted to do all along. So now, if you fast forward all these years later, I joined in 1983. I'm still there. So we're 41 years and counting right now.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow. Yeah, that's not the traditional path that you see that people take. But it definitely worked out for you. And, having such a long career with one organization, obviously being the president now, it's pretty unique. It's definitely rare.
Yeah.
Were there any pivotal moments or influences early in your career or in that transition period that really shaped the path? Because it seems like you were pretty early into robotics and automation at that time, but you just like found something that you love and stuck with it. So is there anything that you can pinpoint?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that happened is I told you about the expectations that
Yeah.
robots were going to go straight up and they were going to put everybody out of work, and artificial intelligence was this huge threat. All
Hmm.
similar things that we're hearing
Hearing
now.
today. Yeah, exactly.
But the big thing was that the industry nearly collapsed.
Oh,
So
wow.
it went from this is the next industrial revolution to by the mid to late 80s, it was a failed industry. Like robotics was dead, the stuff didn't work. General Motors, which was the biggest customer at the time, and may still be, canceled tons of orders,
Wow.
and things looked pretty bleak. And so that was a really interesting time period. Now, during that period, again, I'm talking about the 80s still, we started out as just a robotics association. But in 1984, we launched a machine vision association.
Wow.
And
In
there was
84.
similar kinds of expectations for machine vision, that it
Hmm.
was, you know, some people were saying that if a robot doesn't have vision by 1990, you won't call it a robot. Well, I don't think every robot has
Yeah.
vision today yet.
Nope.
It's a really important technology, but it just like robotics didn't develop as quickly, and it also had a major downturn at some point in the 80s. But for me, that was an opportunity to run that association. So when we formed it, they put me in charge of it. In addition to doing the marketing and PR for robotics, I was given the opportunity to run the Vision Association. Again, there
Mm.
were only like 5 of us at the time. So I think we might have got up to 15, and then something happened, and I'll tell you about that. And we ended up going back to 5. So that gave me another opportunity to build something from the ground up. And that association was growing pretty rapidly and became, and still to this day, the largest machine vision group in the world. So we were broadening our scope. We were bringing in new companies. I was meeting all kinds of new people, learning new things. And that was a pivotal period. And it was during that downturn that I really probably gained the most knowledge about how to do this job.
Amazing. So the early days don't sound smooth. It sounds like there
No,
was some
no.
ups and downs. Um,
Yeah.
what were some of the initial goals of the association when it was formed and uh, when you guys separated and went out? Obviously, it was for the companies initially, but what were the goals and how are you supposed to support them?
The goals back then are almost identical to what they are today,
Oh, really?
which is to educate companies on how to successfully apply automation. So it was robotics at that time exclusively, and then we added vision and other technologies. But that's the goal. And how do you go about that educational process? Well, one way, of course, is with our trade show, Automate, which back then was multiple names, but it started out as the Robot Show. In 1982, this is interesting. This is a little off what you're asking me, but it's really interesting. In 1982, the Robot Show was so busy. I think it attracted about 28,000 people in the
Wow.
basement of Cobo Hall. It was so busy that the fire marshal had to close the escalator into the basement. Now, we didn't reach that point of attendance until probably this year. I mean, that's
Really?
how long it taken. That's how much excitement there was. I mean, you see all this excitement around AI now and humanoids and all these technologies. That's what it was like at the beginning of robotics. Money was being thrown at it. The state of Michigan was investing pension funds in a robot company based in Michigan. All this stuff was happening. And there were hundreds of companies involved in robotics in the US. Major US companies were making robots. And then when the downturn came, they all left. And at one point, there was one US company making robots for a long time.
Wow.
So that was interesting. So, but back to the mission, how do we educate people? The robot show and conference was our main activity back then. When the things got bad, it had been an annual show, and then it went to an every other year show, and it began to shrink. We had to come up with other ways to educate people. We couldn't rely just on that. So we formed a whole series of conferences that we did on specific topics like grinding and finishing, which we still have revived and are doing now, flexible part assembly, robot safety. That was job one. We started that conference 1986, I believe, was the first one, maybe even before. But we had to have ways to continue to educate. And at that time, it was all print. So we had newsletters and, you know, books and things like that. But that's continued to be the goal today. How do you convince companies that they need to automate and give them the tools they need? If you go to our website, automate.org, you see that that's really what it is. How do you get started? Who are the companies making the products? What's the education that I need? So that's what it's all about.
That's really cool. And so companies can become members of A3, right? How does A3 assist companies within the automation and robotics industries? Like what do you provide for those people part of the association?
Yeah. So we have 1,300 plus member organizations. Most of them are companies who make robots, machine vision systems, AI, motion control, and all the related automation technologies. And what they're joining for are multiple reasons. Like we have system integrators members as well, and end users and consultants. Everybody's got a different reason for joining. For the supplier members, it could be to find customers. It could be to partner with other, enabling technologies or integrators. For the users, it's to have access to the major companies and find out what's the latest and greatest in the industry. Educational institutions want to join so they can keep their finger on the pulse of what's happening in industry and also find people who might want to support their research. So there are a lot of reasons to become. And so we do all these things. So we hold events that bring people together, like our annual business forum in Orlando every year. It's a great networking event. There's no exhibits. People come and they forge these relationships. And there's 750 senior leaders. So when people come, they can get a lot of business done in a hurry because the major players are in the room.
Right.
Somebody once referred to that as the room where it happens, because a lot goes on at that meeting. So we've been doing these things for a long time in general for members. More recently, I've started spending a lot of my time, and the association is focused more on helping startups get started. So we've had a pretty good track record of helping startups. So sometimes companies will come to us and say, hey, we're developing this product. Could you introduce us to X, Y, and Z company who could help us? And sometimes we do that. We make that introduction. Usually our members are willing to listen to a startup. Sometimes they'll say, yeah, we spoke to that company and they convinced us we're headed in the wrong direction. We're going to pivot to another direction. And we've had some
Amen.
successful players go that route. In other cases, it's, hey, can you help introduce me to some company that I'm having trouble getting to? And we make that introduction, and then they are able to make the business because they were having trouble lower in the company. They
Hmm.
weren't getting senior executives.
Got it.
We're pretty good at connecting. Recently, there's a startup, Gray Matter Robotics. They just announced yesterday they raised another 45 million.
Yeah,
I
the
met Gray
Series B.
Matter. Yeah, I met Gray Matter when they were still in USC's lab before they spun out as a commercial entity. They were still putting the finishing touches on what they were working on. And I introduced them to 3M. They were trying to get into 3M, and I knew some people there and said, hey, maybe you want to look at this too. Maybe you've got some people looking at it. I know that 3M ended up investing in Gray Matter.
Amazing.
So that's just one example of companies and how we go about helping companies.
Perfect. Yeah, I was going to ask for any success stories that came to mind. So that's great. And I love that it's a local, at least to me, company that you used as an example because I'm in Southern California as well. So that's cool.
Another company in California, Northern California, Raised Robotics. They're a
Yeah.
construction robotics company. Met Gary Chen, was really interested in learning about construction applications. He's like an encyclopedia. He knew everything. I met an investor the same day, and he said, "Hey, yeah, we're looking to invest in construction robot." I said, "Hey, I just talked to a guy. You should meet him." And met that. I think the very same day, like
No way.
I met, and that ended up leading to an investment as well. So
That's really cool.
those are the kinds of things that, having been in the industry for over 4 decades, I know a lot of people, and I'm pretty good at matchmaking.
Yeah, I
And
love
as
that.
is the association. It's not just me. We have plenty of people who are good at that as well.
It sounds like it's worth its weight in gold. So if there's any companies out there, startups or anyone that's looking for help with BD connections and just learning, definitely look at signing up. Sounds like a no-brainer. Let's talk about how things have evolved since the inception. I know you said that the goals and mission have always been the same, and you've added new shows and new ways of educating. But is there anything else that's changed apart from the size? Well, it sounds like it went really big and then dipped, and it's getting big again. But
Yeah. So there is a major thing that changed. So it started out, I mentioned, as just a robot association.
mhm.
We launched a vision association, which also grew in parallel. And when robots went down, vision was going up for a while. So, but they were separate entities. And if you wanted to join an association, either one of those two, and then we added a motion group in 2006. If you wanted to join that, you had to have multiple memberships.
Oh, interesting.
And then we formed our AI group a few years ago, and a lot of companies were saying to us, hey, we're interested in all these technologies. Why is it so complicated to join? Why can't we join one thing? And this was Google and Intel and Microsoft and companies like that
Yeah.
telling us this. And so it wasn't easy, because when you have associations like RIA that had been around since 1974, and you're telling them that the name RIA is going to go away and it's now going to be called the Association for Advancing Automation, that's going to be the front-facing name. There was, concern. Same thing in the machine vision group. It was called the Automated Imaging Association. That name we don't have as a front-facing name anymore. Motion
Mm.
Control and Motors. So you had to get everybody on the same page to make it. There's one membership, one organization, and that took a while. We finally made that happen in 2021.
Okay.
So that's what we are, and it's been extremely successful. It's been much cleaner, and the end users were telling us the same thing. Look, we need all these technologies. We don't want to join just one association either. And this is how industry is now. These things are all part of a solution.
Right.
And so
They're
that's who we are.
intertwined.
It's been really good.
That's great. Yeah, you can see from anyone that's looking at a technology stack, like how important each part is instead of it being separate. So having them intertwined and underneath the same group sounds like a no-brainer for sure. Any key milestones in the association's journey that you can share, or things that stick out for you?
Well, so I mentioned that Automate had started out as a robot show, and then it was a robot vision in motion. And
Hmm.
it was in the Great Recession, um, 2009, spring, I think it was. We had a show in Rosemont, Illinois, and that's where we had been for a while.
Hmm.
And the show, just wasn't great. And it was so not great that I had a meeting with one of our largest members and biggest exhibitors, and they said, "Look, the show costs us a lot of money. How about if we just pay you not to hold it?" You can imagine what that was like,
Wow.
hearing somebody offer to pay you not to hold your flagship event. And it was an every other year show, and it just lost what it had been in the beginning.
Hmm.
I mentioned what it was in 1982, and over time, it just had dwindled. Um, and so our board said, well, that's not a sustainable path where we go out and ask hundreds of companies to pay us not to do something. But you got to fix this show. You have to fix it, or we're not going to support it. So I had one more shot, and we ended up making an arrangement with another show to co-locate at McCormick Place in Chicago, which is the big arena, not where we were in Rosemont, which was a nice place but small. And in 2011, we rebranded everything. We relayed out the show, and it became Automate, and it was successful, better than it had been. That show was 40,000 square feet, the first Automate. 6, 7 shows later was this year. We're almost 10 times as large this year as we were back then.
Wow.
So, and it's back to an annual show. COVID came and it changed our pattern. So we had to hold back-to-back shows in 22 and 23. They were so successful that we decided to make it an annual show. We held our most successful show ever this year in Chicago. We'll be back in Detroit. So everything has changed, but it all happened at that bottom moment in 2009 that set Automate now on this tremendous growth path. It's over 900 exhibitors and over 43,000 registrants and almost 400,000 square. I mean, all the numbers were records this year, and so that we hope that will continue. So that was a key moment, because everything that we do to educate people or develop industry standards or collect statistics or launch robot and vision certification motion certification programs, those are all things that we take whatever we generate at events like Automate and pour back into those value added activities for the members and for the industry. Standards take decades to develop, and it's very costly and time intensive. And so you can't fund those things if there isn't some source of major revenue. Now, we're lucky; we have lots of revenue, and we're not struggling for money now. But back in 2009, had that robot show gone away, that would have been a very different discussion we were having today. I
Yeah, I
don't
can
know.
imagine.
I don't know if I'd been here.
Yeah. I heard so many good things about Automate this year, and I was so sad I missed it. I was had some other travel planned, but I'll definitely be there next year, 100%.
Great, excellent.
Let's shift gears here, because I was on the website. I know that you've also got like a talent section. So obviously, coming from the recruiting world, I love to talk about building teams, talent, and everything like that. In your experience, how crucial is it to have strong team members in the automation and robotics industry, especially at different stages of the company, right? When you're first building the product, trying to get traction, and then later on when you've already got that flywheel going?
Oh, I think it's critical. I think that's the differentiator between companies is, do they have a strong team? And whether it's a technical team or a sales team or a management team, that is what separates, I think, companies. Because, having good technology is, maybe a baseline. If you're going to be selling these products, you have to have good technology. But do you have people that are innovative, that can figure out applications for that technology, that can react quickly to changing customer demands? Um, there's so many areas where uh, those are the defining characteristics of companies that do well versus the ones that maybe don't.
Yeah. And from the association side, is it more on the entry level grad side that you can help, like with a portal with applicants and people getting into the space, or are there like introductions and stuff that happen organically through being part of it?
Oh, for sure. So yes, we can help people. We have that career center on our
Hmm.
website. Um, but people are often reaching out to us and saying, "Hey, confidentially, I'm looking for something. Do you know?" And we've made a lot of those kind of connections for people. And this is an industry. One thing I really love about the people in this industry, they're willing to help. If they can't assist, if let's say I go to them and say, "Hey, there's this person I know who's interested," they say, "We don't have anything, but one of our competitors is look." They're often willing to do what's in the best interest of the industry.
Yeah.
In association, we have this saying that when you're a member of the association, you have to leave your logo at the door. When
Mm.
you're at a board or a committee or something, you have to think about what's in the best interest. And I think they've all bought into this, because the real barrier to our members selling more is if companies don't buy. It's not like it has to be from them. If companies are buying automation, that means everybody will benefit. The more companies that buy, somebody will win that business. But the barrier is, if that company doesn't ever automate, or another
Mm.
company doesn't automate, there's not going to be as much business to win. So they're all pretty good about that and helping. And yeah, I know this person and you'd be a good fit for them. People are really open. And that's why our events are so important, like the A3 Business Forum I mentioned that's in Orlando every January, or Automate. Those are great networking opportunities for anybody. And we're doing a lot with the education community now. We had a huge education pavilion at Automate. And so there's all this up and coming talent that's there at the show that people have a chance to talk to.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. I've heard about such great connections being made. So I'll be at both this next year. Uh, what qualities do you think are essential for team members, for companies within robotics and automation? Do you think it differentiates from other kinds of industries?
No, I don't. I don't think so. I mean, there's the technical proficiency that you have to have for certain positions, um, but it's sort of this authenticity. I think when you're dealing this level of trust that you can build
Yeah.
with customers or potential customers, and be honest with them about what you can achieve and what you can't, and level set expectations. One of the things that got the robotics industry in hot water in the early 80s, when people were starting to write it off by the end of that decade, was because the customers felt that maybe the industry had overpromised, that these buy this and you'll solve all your problems. Well, that didn't happen, of course. And a lot of robots sat in boxes because the ones that had been opened didn't work that well, or they couldn't figure out how to use them. It was too complicated. The level of difficulty, the cost, and the lack of trained people, because robotics was new, all of that, I think, conspired to prevent the growth of the industry, but also the fact that people felt that they were being promised more than the technology was capable of.
Mm.
So we don't want to go through that again. So we've done a really good job, I think, at the supplier level and the integrator level, of making sure customers understand what it's going to take to be successful and how to start. Don't start with everything. Start small, start smart, start with something that will build confidence among your team that this is a good approach to automate. don't pick the hardest applications, because if they could be done by people, they would have been done by people. If they were too hard, why do you think the robot can do it?
Yeah,
So, so there's a lot of things that go into that trust in order to build a company and to build the industry.
that's great. That makes me think, right now there's a big movement and buzz and hype within. Well, there's two things I want to ask you about buzz and hype, but this movement for general purpose, like humanoids and general purpose
Yeah.
robotics and things like that, instead of single use or dual use, like it sounds like, as you advocate for, at least initially. What's your opinion on that, or do you have any thoughts about that type of product?
Yeah, I do. So I was recently interviewed on CNN on a show they do called Decoded, and Anna Stewart is the host, and she focused the whole program on humanoids. And she asked me what I thought, and I said, I'm skeptical. I think we're a lot further away than it makes it sound right now with what you're hearing and all the money that's flowing in. And, it just seems like these challenges are harder. It's not clear to me that a humanoid is even the best solution in every one of these applications. There are other solutions that are out there. That form factor may be good in certain industries, but not others. I said, I'm skeptical. I think it'll be decades before we see them in our homes, and it could be at least a decade before they're in widespread use in industry. And that's where I was. That was January. Since January, we've been a lot more active in investigating this industry. We had a major humanoid robot panel at Automate. I've talked to a lot of the players in the field. The advances in AI are coming pretty quickly. So we're launching a humanoid robot forum on October 7th in Memphis. First one, I believe, that's been held in industry. There have been educational humanoid robots forums, but this is the first industry humanoid robot forum. I want to see where we are at that point, and whether maybe I was too skeptical, because I know I'm not alone in this skepticism. I talk to a lot of people who are skeptical. But the more I listen to the case being made by the companies in that field, and the more I see the advances in AI, the more I think it's possible that things could happen quicker. Elon Musk, of course, is still out there talking about how he'll have a $10,000 robot and there'll be billions of them and all that. I think he's too optimistic, but we'll see. He's got a lot of money.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's so many people that are skeptical about it, and rightly so. And I think, which leads me on to the second part of what I wanted to ask you about, like the hype cycles and the buzz and everything, because you started with that really when you talk about 81, 82, and everyone being so excited by it. There being tons of robotics companies, even in the US, and companies looking to adopt it and money just flowing into it. And it seems like we're there again, right? The ripple effects of the buzz for AI, and now everyone realizing really the impact's going to happen when AI meets hardware, even though this has been, like you said, talked about since the 80s in some shape or form. Right. How does that make you think about this current cycle that we're in? Is it the same as then, or do you think like the advancements in technology and the lower cost of software and hardware changes things?
Yeah, I do. I do think it's different this time. But, for people like me that have lived through hearing it's different this time a lot of times, that's part of the skepticism. And again, that's one of the concerns I have, is that maybe I'm too skeptical. But I do think it is different. I think the cost, you hit on a key issue, the cost of some of this stuff is much lower. The capabilities are much higher. And it does seem like some of these things are possible. Now, are there a lot of barriers to overcome? I think so. And safety being one of them. We're talking about humanoids being in all parts of our lives. Well, what happens when it's in your house and it's carrying something and it falls, or the power goes at something and it falls on grandma? It's like, we see what happens with driverless cars. And that's another hype cycle that I was skeptical on. And I think I've been right on that. We kept hearing, oh, within 5 years, everybody's going to have driverless cars, or, oh no, it's another 5 years. And we're nowhere near that, right? We're making progress. Eventually, I believe, yeah, there'll be a lot of driverless cars out there, but it's taking so much longer than people said. I think that might be what we end up with humanoids.
Yeah.
This idea that they're going to do all these tasks and they're going to be in our homes as well as in industry, and it's going to go and everybody will have them. I don't know. I mean, it's possible, but then again, let's think about things like safety. Let's think about things like what would be the cost for a home to buy one of these devices.
Yeah.
The only successful robots that have ever been in a home are vacuum cleaners, and what are they? $500, $700. People aren't necessarily willing to pay $10,000 to have a home robot unless it's really, really, really useful.
Yeah.
That's my view.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the self-driving car thing, or just an autonomous vehicle in general, I think we're going to see humanoids in industry, whether it's a warehouse or construction site or whatever, a lot sooner than we're ever going to see them in a shop or in our own home. Because the same thing with the autonomous vehicle, it's much easier to get an L4, L5 level autonomous vehicle in a construction site or in a mine or some controlled private environment than in front of everyone, right, in the general public. And there's less variables in there that you need to account for. And regulation is always a huge one. Even if the technology is ready, it's going to be so long to get that passed, and the safety side, etc.
Right. And I totally agree. You will see them in factories and warehouses first. And apparently there's a lot of pilots going on out there, and maybe they'll be very successful and it'll work. But maybe there's still a better solution for some of this stuff. And that's what companies are ultimately going to have to decide. Yeah, the technology works, but there's something better we can do.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, we will see. Time will tell for sure. But I think one of the cautionary things, and a previous guest that I had on, Fady from Cybernetics Ventures, was talking about, and this is again earlier this year, so before more of the progress happened and before more of the press and updates and technology moved forward. But his caution was or his word of caution was towards investors or people coming into the space, because he didn't want people who just get caught into the hype investing and getting burned by such a long time horizon. Same with self-driving cars, right? People thought that was the thing, threw tons of money into it, and then slowly but surely things were consolidating, companies were shutting down, it was taking longer. And if you never invested in robotics, differentiating that isn't just robotics, right? If you invested in humanoids, there's so many other areas of robots that you should look at or could look at that will have a much quicker time to commercialization than this longer period that you might not be ready for as someone who hasn't been investing in hardware.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Fady's a sharp guy. Fady was the guy I mentioned who I introduced to Raised Robotics and Gary Chen.
Yeah, I was talking with Fady and Gary last week at Fady's event, the Robotics Invest conference. So
Did you go?
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah.
I was there.
I was planning on going, but something came up that I couldn't make it.
It's one of the reasons my voice. I was there, and then I was in San Francisco, and I've just been all over. So now I'm struggling a little bit. Too much travel. Okay, well, look, this is really great stuff, and again leads me into something else I wanted to ask you about: trends and innovation. So, is there anything that you're particularly excited about from trends and innovations that you're seeing in the automation and robotics space?
Well, I think a lot of the work that's being done in ease of use technologies, that's been one of the barriers, especially with small and medium-sized companies who we're trying to convince to automate. It's a little bit difficult. We don't have the staff. So the easier you can make it, the better it is. And we're seeing a lot of advances there. Companies like Intrinsic and others who are Vention and Ready Robotic. Everyone who's working on these ease of use technologies. And then one interesting thing still that hasn't fully developed the way people expected: collaborative robots. So collaborative robots was one of those technologies that um, certainly changed the way we perceive what a robot is. I mean, the robot used to be behind a fence. That was a robot, big, heavy thing behind a fence. And then when robots that are so-called collaborative robots came, they worked side by side with people. Still not doing a whole lot collaboratively. I mean, they're doing a lot next to people, but there's not a lot of actual collaboration. But I think there could be. And I think we're seeing more and more applications develop for that technology. At Automate, somebody just, I don't know if it's true, said that there were like 700 collaborative robots on
Really?
the floor. Yeah, it was because one company had 50 and another had. So that that is starting to heat up. And I think because of the speed with which you can get them up and running and the potential for more collaboration, I think that's still got a lot of ways to grow.
Yeah, definitely. I think some people see that as like a lower barrier to entry as well,
Yeah,
having collaborative robots and human in the loop, etc. And
yeah.
how do you see the industry evolving over the next 5 to 10 years with the influx of capital and advancements in technology and just, I guess, adoption in general as well?
Well, my view of adoption is that we're still in the early days of adopting these technologies. Um, you know, whether it's robotics or vision or AI, whatever, we're still early. There's
Mm.
still so much more potential. And with all of the labor shortages in just about every industry, and with the retiring baby boom generation, we're going to need more automation everywhere. Um, and so I think adoption is going to be much, much larger in the future, whether it's 5 years, 10 years. I think it will steadily rise and then um, be much, much bigger than it is today.
Nice. Yeah, it doesn't sound like there's a switch that's just going to flip and everyone adopts overnight.
No, because you have to look at this. We're a global organization. We're not just a U.S. Our 1,300 members come from all over the world. But think about places where there isn't any automation yet.
Hmm.
So there's tons in China, hardly any in India. India is now making it a more of a strategic goal to automate.
Hmm.
Africa, not that much. South America, not that much.
Right.
So they're all going to face similar challenges with aging populations. Many of them are going to face, and the need to, improve quality, productivity, and time to market, and all those things that automation can help companies do. So I think there's just so many more opportunities out there than we've touched upon, even in the U.S.
Nice. And let's talk about the future goals for A3 and how you plan to continue supporting the growth of the industry. Is there anything in the works right now or that we should keep a lookout for?
I mean, we would like to be seen as the place where you come to get started. You say, I'm thinking about automating, and we want A3 to be your first stop. And so we're going to put more effort into creating more awareness. I mean, we have so many resources that people aren't aware of,
Mm.
videos and articles and online presentations and all this information that would help people. So we want to make sure that we spend enough effort letting people know that we are the leading resource for if you're thinking about getting started with automation or expanding. I already use automation for this. How can I expand it? We've got all those resources, so we want to make sure they get into the hands of people who can use them.
That's awesome. All right, before we wrap, because this has been such a great talk and you've got a wealth of knowledge and time in the industry, are there any words of wisdom or advice that you'd give to our listeners? Maybe it's people, like you said, starting out or that have found robotics and decided that robotics automation is the career path for me.
Yeah, it's a great choice if they've made that decision that they think it's a good career path for them, because it will be, because the demand for skilled people in this industry is very high and it's going to get higher. Um, and I would say take advantage of the networking opportunities through organizations like ours or others in their own, maybe specific area that they're interested in. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's people who make decisions about hiring and people who can help others get in the room with people who can advance their career. But you still have to have all the skills and you still have to be able to meet the demands of whatever you're hiring for. But this is a great industry to get involved in.
Love that. How can our listeners get involved with A3 and find out more about you or just the association in general and follow your events and all the upcoming stuff?
We've got a great website at www.automate.org. And that's how you learn about us and everything that we have to offer. And then for people who are interested in the Automate Show specifically, we have another website, automateshow.com. And that is filled with information on the upcoming show in Detroit in May of 2025.
Amazing. Well, I will make sure to be there. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jeff. This has been awesome. I'm really excited for this one to get released. And I look forward to keeping in touch with you and hopefully meeting you in person soon.
Yeah, thank you. I look forward to it. Take care.
Thanks, Jeff.